Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar titled Increase Sales and Profit in Your Colocation Business with DSIM. My name is Mark Gatos. I'm Chief Marketing Officer here at Inlight Software. I want to thank you for the time you're going to be spending with us. I wanted to let you know we are actually going to be recording this webinar. We'll be sending out a link so you don't have to necessarily take notes. We'll send out a link to the webinar after it is completed. It is being recorded. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to submit them into the question area, and we will try to get to them by the end. Can we move to the next slide, Bob? If you're not familiar with Inlight webinars, we try to keep these pretty fast-paced. We try to keep them under 30 minutes with presentation and Q&A at the end. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them. But we do tend to move at a pretty brisk pace. So I am fortunate today to have our senior engineer, Bob Parker, with me today. Thanks, Bob, for joining us. Today's agenda is we're going to talk a little bit about DSIM. We'll talk about Inlight software, and we'll talk at a high level about data center infrastructure management software, for those of you that are not familiar. But then I'll turn it over to Bob, and Bob's going to talk about sort of the 7 DSIM essentials for colocation. And he's going to talk about existing colocation companies and how they're using DSIM to increase the efficiency of their organizations and increase their sales. And then, of course, we'll have a summary, and then hopefully we'll be able to get to the Q&A at the end. So if we can move to the next slide. So for those that are not familiar, data centers are pretty complex places, right? Managing the modern data center is like almost managing a factory floor. There are people, there's networking, there's cabling, there are assets, there's processes, there's policies, there are resources, all that have to be managed in real time throughout the organization. And if you have, if it's a co-location facility, you still have to manage the elements that you are responsible for, such as power and the environmentals. But for many organizations, they go beyond that. They have to manage racks and servers and cabling and everything involved. And data center infrastructure management is a set of software that allows you to manage these processes and these resources more efficiently. Next slide, please. So if you think about data center infrastructure management, it's really part of a bigger story, which is data center service management, which is the idea of delivering service within your colocation. And we consider data center infrastructure management as the foundation for that. But you also want to do things like workflow management, make sure employees are following given processes and policies within your organization. And then typically, you want to integrate. And there's sort of an orchestration of integrating the information you're capturing within your colocation with information you're getting out of your building management system and your environmental systems, as well as tying it into your ITSM systems and your financial systems. And so DSIM really is the foundation software that enables you to do this, and is really the foundation for what we call data center service management, because it's not about delivering, right, a co-location. It's about delivering a service to your customers. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're fortunate to have Bob Parker today, who's going to be taking us through sort of 7 core use cases we see within co-location facilities to help make them more profitable and help make them more efficient. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. As Mark mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about DSIM, but primarily how it equates or how it moves towards the co-location market and for colo providers. And what we've done is we've boiled down 7 items, or what we're calling essentials for co-location, starting with capacity planning, power monitoring, cooling management, migration and consolidation, workflow, SLA management, and then everyone's favorite, chargeback. So we've seen that DSIM can mean different things to different customers, but these 7 areas, what we're calling essentials, will help co-location providers increase their profits, hopefully, and be able to manage their space and their power as best as possible. So we're going to run through these 7 in the next 20 minutes or so, and we'll take you through that. So the first essential that we have is capacity planning and sales enablement. And as the old saying goes, Mark, you can't track what you don't monitor, and that's about as favorite of mine as a single pane of glass that we hear all the time. So we'll just refer to that one time anyway. So the most important thing, right, is capacity planning for colocation, because that's what they're selling. That's their inventory, right? So space, power, cooling is all important in what they're trying to sell. And it's important to keep track of what you have because that's your inventory. You want to be able to match your growth with your capacity and be able to plan ahead for your salespeople to sell the inventory that you have. And if you notice on the slide there, on the left-hand side, there's a legend that talks about how you can basically in Neo, one of our applications, be able to rank the racks in terms of whether it's available for reserved, it's something for future, and active, passive, future, and reserved. And we've actually built this option in for our colo customers to be able to put reservations on racks. And you can see the different colors on the left-hand side there and also on the right. Those racks can be categorized. So this is important for the salespeople. They can see what inventory is available for sale, and more importantly, the operations folks can put a time limit. So if the reservation expires at the end of June, those reserved cabinets go back into the inventory for other people to sell. So again, it's really important to understand that that inventory is the most important thing, and having capacity planning helps with sales enablement and what they can sell. I have two colo providers right now in the Northeast that I'm thinking of that they use Neo for general power and environmental monitoring, and the capacity planning that they use is rolled up from their multiple sites or multiple rooms. So they use Neo specifically to keep track of their colo space, as you can see on the screen here, but they roll all that up into their overall capacity planning from a sales perspective and be able to let their sales folks know what's out there to sell.
Hey, Bob, a real quick question. Can you tell everyone what Neo means? It's not a reference to the Matrix, because I don't think you're going to come up with Morpheus or Trinity after this, right? So why don't you let everybody know what Neo stands for?
Sure. Neo is Nlight Energy Optimizer, and for those of you that have been around a while, that's the old FieldView product that was renamed last year after the acquisition. So Nlight Energy Optimizer is the application that I'll be referring to, and most of the screenshots that you'll see are from Neo, or Nlight Energy Optimizer, and that's the real-time monitoring and power alarming application that we have. That it can be a standalone system, or more importantly, with our Platinum Edition, the two brought together can tie Nlight Energy Optimizer in with Nlight Enterprise Edition. So those are the two applications.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you.
The next essential is power monitoring, right? That's probably one of the most important things that we'll talk about, is being able to keep track of the power that we have in our data center. Right? It's usually easier to acquire space, but it's not always that easy to acquire power. Right? You may have power coming into the building at different locations, maybe on the wrong side of the building, and it may be going to a distribution panel that doesn't allow easily to get the power to the new suite or new cage that you're building for your customer. So it's important to be able to track power and avoid stranded power. So tracking power in the application is important, and more importantly is redundancy, right? We need the A side and we need the B side as well. Just some famous airline incidences that we've had over the past year, and as recent as last week with British Airways, they didn't come out and say it yet, but I think what I've read is they're alluding to the fact that they had a power issue, a power supply issue, and that could have meant, they didn't have any redundancy, A or B side. Or at least they didn't know that they didn't have it. And one of the things that Neo offers, as you can see here on the left side of the screen, power monitoring. Obviously, we're tracking power in the application, but on the right-hand side, we have power failure and simulation and prevention, where you can actually, our colo customers can actually go in and test their failover scenarios to make sure that the B side power will capture the A side should the A side fail over. So again, that's really important. Is number one, tracking the power. But number two, making sure that there's redundancy to make sure that uptime is there, and any type of outage might be avoided. So it's important for that.
So Bob, I just want to clarify. So you're not actually causing failures. You're just able to go into the software and pick an item and fail it, and then see what the ramifications, what the waterfall looks like. Is that the gist of it? You're not actually causing failures. You're just simulating it.
That's exactly right. On the right-hand side there, you can see that when this screenshot was taken, we simulated a power failure on a panel, And you can see on the right side, that was the B side panel that failed also because it couldn't handle that failover, right? That's exactly what we're doing. It's simulation only, but it's based on real-time power. And that's important. It's not manufacturer's derated power. It's real power that are on those devices. And we're saying if you were to lose this, what would happen in the failover? I have two examples of three colo customers that we have, two in the Northeast, one in the Southeast, that are doing heavy-duty power monitoring, and they're utilizing branch circuit monitoring, they're utilizing overhead busway, and they're doing some rack PDU monitoring, but mostly it's BCM and overhead busway. So they're getting down to the rack level, and they're doing that power monitoring to make sure that they have that redundancy so their customers won't go down should the A side or B side fail. The third essential that we have is related to power, but it's cooling management. And again, it's closely related, and modern data centers, as you know, are packed, Mark, with higher density units, and the need for cooling is much more severe now than it used to be. But, Mark, I'm sure you've walked into a data center where it's about 60 degrees, and you need to have a coat on. And we've learned over time that you don't need to keep the data centers that cool, right? You don't need to freeze people out and if they have to go in there. So temperature monitoring and raising temperature safely and monitoring what happens is another key essential to make sure that we're not overcooling, right? We have to make sure that the computers are cool, the compute power is cool, but we don't want to make it, a 60-degree situation where, it's just unbearable to walk into the data center. And more importantly, you can save money, right, by reducing the amount of effort that you're taking to cool the site.
So realistically, so Bob, I'm just going to clarify again. So you can, I guess the whole idea is you can confidently raise the temperature, which is really lowering your cost, but you can do it incrementally and sort of see, are you creating any hot spots in doing so? Is that sort of the gist?
Yeah, actually, I can't remember the source, but we did a study not too long ago, but the statistic that stood out is that for every 1 degree of temperature increase, that equates to 4% annual savings on the electrical bill. So what customers can do, and I have a couple examples that I was going to reference, specifically one here in the Northeast, that they're monitoring their cracks, the return air temperature, they're obviously monitoring the power on the cracks, but they're monitoring through wireless temperature sensors all of their cages. So what they can do is they can gradually raise the temperature 1 degree at a time, safely take a look at what's happening at the real-time temperatures of where the inlets are for the servers and see what that temperature rating is and making sure it's within ASHRAE. But again, having that confidence that, you know what, I can raise the temperature, I can reduce the cost of cooling this data center, and I can raise it safely and know exactly what those temperatures are and making sure that I'm staying on the upper end of the ASHRAE scale. That was a good example. All right, the next one that we have, our fourth one, is migration and consolidations. So once you've figured out space, power, and cooling and kind of what you have in terms of an inventory, it's important to really understand to optimize your co-location space, and if there's any migration that needs to take place or any consolidation, rather than open up a new room for new cages, maybe I can use some of the existing space I already have and be able to pack that full with additional co-location customers in terms of tenants and build additional cages. So if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, we have power, cooling, and space. Those sunburst graphics that we have there are a great way to understand what those three items are in terms of overall a facility or even down to a room level. Just by mousing over those different graphics, you can get those totals and understand what your capacities are to see if you can have the ability to migrate or consolidate some of the other areas that you have in a colo, whether it's a floor, whether it's another building, or needing to build a new facility. So it's important to know what that inventory is if you're trying to consolidate and offer more space for your customers. I have another example of a colo customer, actually two here in the Northeast. The power and cooling and space, these sunburst graphics are there and highlighted that they can use it quickly to find those resources. They're using NEO to track multiple data centers and rooms at a high level, right? We're getting power, cooling, and space. And in our second example, for instance, that specific colo customer does not have a BMS, a building management system. So in that case, NEO is serving as the monitoring tool for their cracks, for their generators, for everything that they have, temperature sensors and so on. So all that facility devices are coming into NEO, and that's their one-stop shop to be able to understand what that facility is supported and what's happening from a monitoring perspective in those data centers in that colo. Moving on to the next area is workflow management. And often, what is workflow? And you alluded to this earlier, Mark. It's simply put, it basically tells you what you need to do, what, when, and where. So it's a process that you follow, and it could be as simple as deploying a new server, creating a new room. What are the steps to take place in that process to get the desired outcome of the process itself? It's important, especially for preset roles, and again, as I mentioned, rolling out a new server, a new room. So having those steps documented in the process. So it's important to have a robust workflow, and is crucial, a prerequisite to fulfill SLAs, to make sure that you're getting things out on time. If customers want, colo customers want, their tenants want new racks in place, what's the SLA in time to get that out? So you want to be very crisp on your workflow management. Workflow is actually, I'll call this a new essential for colo, because it's something new that Nlyte has released in terms of tying the two together. We talked about Neo, we talked about Enterprise Edition. Well, Enterprise Edition has always had a great workflow arm to it, a great module. But now, over the last few months, we've released the ability now for Neo to spawn a workflow from an alarm. So that integration allows, for alarm handling, and depending on how deep that workflow process goes, that can get into alarm correlation. It can get into alarm management. Once that alarm hits, what happens? What's the first step? What's the second step? And this is actually really good for overnight security guards, right? An alarm hits, they don't know what to do. The workflow kicks in, and they're able to follow the process exactly from start to finish on what needs to be done and how that needs to be created.
And the thing about this workflow we like to emphasize is that the workflow is specifically built for data centers and co-location facilities. It's designed, it isn't something that was created and then we bolted on abilities to deal with data centers. The workflow is purpose-built to handle the special sort of requirements of dealing with assets, dealing with power, dealing with cabling, dealing with anything you'd really find in a data center. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And being able to handle alarm management now with alarms coming from Neo, and being able to spawn that process and to follow that all the way through. And I'd like to encourage our listeners, if they haven't seen an example or a demonstration of Neo recently, we do now have a demo use case that we can generate an alarm in Neo and have it start a workflow over in Enterprise Edition. And workflow goes through and acknowledges the alarm, and then we can turn the alarm off, and you can see what happens to go back and forth. But again, that creates that workflow, that process, so that employees can follow that process to finish out and keep track of those alarms that have taken place. Our next essential is SLA management, and this is a good example, because if colo providers listening in today understand SLAs very clear, right? Their tenants are very interested in making sure that SLAs are kept, and that the service that they're buying, space, power, and cooling, is in place, and SLAs are being met in terms of temperature, the amount of power they're getting, and it's arguably the most crucial aspect of satisfying tenants, because the SLAs stipulate what and how much and when you need to deliver those services to them. But they need to have flexibility as well, and making sure that as the colo grows, as the customer, as the tenant grows, you're able to keep up with those SLAs. And Neo, as an example, for our DSIM tool here for monitoring, gives you that ability to monitor the types of things that the SLAs need to deliver. Looking at the slide here, the portfolio dashboard, then the security and the cabinet team metrics, all of those take into consideration what's happening, and they can prove what's happening in terms of meeting the SLA, right? Did I deliver enough power to my tenant today? Was the temperature in my cage, did it go above ASHRAE standards or whatever the SLA is measuring? Did it go below? Is it too cool, right? So having something like tool Neo in DSIM, you can track that, and then you have that. You have that information that's been trended over a period of time, and it's available for use. And again, it's there to be able to prove that you met your SLAs, and the customers can see it. In fact, I have two colo customers, again, one in the Northeast and one in the southern part, that they're monitoring everything in the one particularly in the Northeast is monitoring everything in terms of temperature, all the facilities, I mentioned them earlier, but they're going into fire suppression, leak detection, and they're basically monitoring everything. And that allows now their customers to get that benefit of the entire facility. And in two cases, this one and one other, the colo provider is looking to build a portal to allow their tenants to come in and see their see the SLAs and see the actual data that's running, and making sure that they have enough power, they have enough cooling going on, so they can monitor their own space in their suite or in their cage and see what's going on. So again, that seems to be a trend from our colo providers of being able to take the information that's being captured in NEO and be able to make that and provide that to the tenants, be able to see what's happening, any alarms that are active, and more importantly, are they meeting what they've signed up to get? And this also moves into something that we'll talk about in a slide or two about pay-as-you-go and bringing tenants on. One of the most critical things about colo is that they don't want to have an outlay of capital too far ahead of time before they get their tenants in there, right? So one of the nice things about NEO is that you can pay as you go. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. You don't have to pay ahead for what you need. You only pay for what you need currently and maybe what you see coming up in the next 6 months, so that you're prepared for that growth. And finally, the last chargeback the last essential that we want to talk about is chargeback, right? We want to be able to charge, colos want to be able to charge their customers for the usage, for the power and cooling that they're using, and that's done through the chargeback system. It's like an itemized bill, right? And having the itemized bill, it's proof of what our customers, what our colo customers, what their tenants are using, and it provides an excellent way to keep track of the power being utilized and a way to bill them. I have a customer in the Southeast, a colo customer that specifically uses the customer billing KWH report that's shown here on this slide and the customer billing AMPS report. They use a combination of those reports to actually bill the customers for their usage each month. So we're capturing it in NEO, we're quantifying it through these reports. They add the amount of charge per kilowatt, and then they have their reports, and they use that to send that out to their customers. So those are the 7 essentials that we've put together to understand, again, what benefits our colo customers to be able to increase their profits and grow their business. And what we've done is, on this last slide, we've summarized these items very quickly here to kind of go over. We talked about chargeback, right? That last essential we just mentioned. That's probably one of the most important things, being able to charge your customers. Reliable and consistent tracking on key metrics. So next one, accelerate sales. Allowing your sales team to know what inventory you have to sell is critical. So giving them access to a product like NEO and the DSIM tool, being able to see what's available for sale and inventory-wise, what can I sell, make it available. So you want to help your sales team to know what they can sell and when it's going to be available. The third item, compliance. We talked about SLA, compliance and response, making sure that we can prove as a colo provider that we have met the SLAs to our tenants, that we've kept the power where it needs to be, we've kept the temperature where it needs to be, and they're getting what they paid for, and we have the proof through the tracking of current and past and trended data that we have for those areas. And then finally, pay as you go. In all of the colo customer examples that I've given today, the 5 or 6 colo customers that I've used as going through the essentials, every one of them has started with a base license of NEO, and to a customer, each one has added to their license as they've needed to grow, right? They've all said, okay, we're going to start with this amount of license, and then we're going to grow it, and we're going to only do it when we have additional customers. And the pay-as-you-go, that philosophy really works well. That way, they're not paying out more than what they've done. And even as late as last week, we had one of our colo customers add additional points because they're growing and they have new tenants. So those are the 7 essentials, and boiling it down to the 4 items that we think our colocation businesses need to know.
Great, Bob. Well, we've actually got quite a few questions, so I'm going to just jump right into it because I want to make sure we get to them. We've got about 5 minutes left. So the first question is from Ravi. Can a colo get billing grade usage in order to charge back its customers?
Yes, and as I mentioned, the example that I brought up earlier, they're using Neo to bill their customers, but it comes down to the type of meter that we're attaching to. So if a customer has a billing grade meter or they want to install one and it has the ability to get on the network and we can monitor it, absolutely. And that would be the source of what we would use to monitor the power going into their tenants. So absolutely, billing grade is something that we can do. And again, it depends on the meter that the customer is using.
Okay, thanks, Bob. The next question is from Perry. What does it cost? How do you price?
Sure, we alluded to cost and price a little while ago. And the way Neo is designed, it's priced by the monitored point. So for example, if a colo customer is monitoring a crack unit, there might be 20 or 30 different values that we can capture out of that crack unit, but the customer may only want to see 10, the ones that are best practices to monitor. And that would be 10 points for that device. So what we do is when we do pre-sales with our customers, we understand what they want to monitor, what's important to them, and then we're able to come up with what we call a point count, right? And that point count is the license, right? 2,000 points, 5,000 points. And so we configure and price the application based on those monitored points. It's not based on the number of sites. It's not based on the number of users. Again, and this falls into that pay-as-you-go that we talked about earlier. You only need to buy the amount of points or license that you need. As you grow the business, as you grow more rooms, you just add points to it, and you continue to grow, as the example I gave earlier.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. So the next question is from Kevin. I may take this one, Bob, which is, can Enlight integrate with Remedy regarding workflow/ticket management? Yeah, actually, Enlight has a very elegant architecture that has a built-in messaging layer into the architecture. And we actually have pre-built connectors. And so we have pre-built connectors for a lot of the main ITSM vendors, including we have an Atrium connector and we also have a Remedy connector. So in the case of Remedy, an example a customer would do is, let's say they want to make changes to the data center. Let's say they want to add 10 racks to a data center floor. There would be an approval process inside Remedy. Once it's approved, then and what's been identified needs to be placed, that would be punched into Enlight, and at that point a workflow would be created with all the specific line items, punch items that need to be done to perform that task. Now, as individuals perform those tasks, they would record that in Enlight, and that information would be fed back into the Remedy system so that the Remedy system would be tracking how far that particular task has proceeded. And the nice thing is you'd also see how long it's taking particular tasks to be performed. And again, you could perform chargeback on the resources being deployed around that particular request. And then once it was closed off, the workflow would be closed. And of course, that information would be fed back into Remedy, and then it could continue in whatever workflow that Remedy itself would have. In fact, BMC is probably one of the most integrated with ITSM vendors we have. So again, we have pre-built connectors for a lot of the ITSM vendors, ServiceNow, HP, BMC. We also have connectors into the virtualization vendors so that you can see what virtuals are running on which specific workloads, which can be very useful if you need to perform migrations or you have hotspots or a variety of other different scenarios. But the long answer is, Kevin, we do support integrating into Remedy from Enlight through these pre-built connectors. So the next question, this person might be joking about their name. This comes from Zippy. So does pay-as-you-grow mean it's free? A little cheeky question. Bob, how would the pay-as-you-grow go?
Yeah, that again, going back to the example, being able to increase the software licenses as you have need, right? As you open up a new room, open up a new suite for a customer, hey, I need another 500 points on my license to be able to monitor this new customer, right? They have 100 racks, and we're going to monitor rack power strips on each one of them. Hey, Enlight, I need another 500 points. So again, and that's fine. We don't have any set regimen on we have to buy 1,000 points at a time or 500 points at a time. We're going to give you what you need to be able to grow. And that way you're not paying ahead and not investing into something that you don't need right up front.
Yeah, and then you can offer it as a value-added service, and you don't have to have money up front until the customer shows interest, and then it's pretty much just you're charging for it, and then there's the profit the co-location would make. Correct, Bob?
That's right. That's right. And then you can also offer, we talked about earlier, the ability to give them the portal too, and colos can either choose to do that or make that a value add, you know, as opposed to someone else going someplace else where they may not have that capability.
Okay, great. We've run out of time, but I'll take two more questions. We have a variety of other questions. We will get to all questions eventually, but the gist is, well, also, Bob, will you move to the resource slide, which is at the end, so folks can see those resources while we answer just a couple more questions. We have more. I'm sorry we're not going to get to them all, but I'll take the next two. From Christopher, what device and protocols do you support?
Well, we support protocols in terms of Modbus, BACnet, OPC, and then XML, XML SOAP. So those are the popular ones that we've seen over the time period that we've been monitoring data centers. So what's most popular now is SNMP and Modbus TCP. Those are the ones that we see. So those protocols allow us to be able to attach these different devices we've been talking about, whether it be a crack unit, a PDU. Again, we're able to connect to these devices and bring that data back into the application, and that's how we're able to collect it, show it in the application, and also trend it.
Okay, great. And the last question is from Ben. We use ServiceNow. Can you folks pass information to Snow? And I think I mentioned that earlier. We have pre-built connectors into ServiceNow, into their incident management, into their workflow, into their CMDB. So again, any information inside Inlight, as we're updating information on the data center floor, any dependencies between devices, we take that information and we will pass it into a CMDB, whether it's HP UCMDB, whether it's BMC Atrium, or it's ServiceNow's solution. So we have run out of time, and so we'll get to all the other questions that came in. I'm sorry we didn't get to it, but we try and keep these tight to 30, but I assure you, everyone, we will get to all their questions. Also, you'll be receiving a link to the recording, so for those that want to review this later, please feel free to do so. Again, thanks for the time you spent with us. We appreciate you listening to this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars. Thank you, Bob Parker, for being our expert information source here for this webinar. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.